LBC.co.uk if you want to have a look at the video. I should warn you, it's pretty violent, but have a look if you wish. Now, some news just breaking, actually. You'll know that the Hatton Garden raid came back into the news this week when there were a number of arrests. Well, a ninth man has been charged with conspiracy to burgle in relation to that Hatton Garden raid. 8 men, you might remember, have already appeared in court in relation to this. They appeared in court yesterday. Any more developments in that, we'll bring them to you here on LBC. Now, I'm joined in the studio now by London Mayoral candidate Ivan Massow. Good afternoon to you.
How's you do?
Thanks for coming in. And David Robinson is on the line, founder of the charity Community Links and co-author of Changing London, which was published this week. Good afternoon to you too, David.
Hello, Sheila.
Hi. Now, Ivan and David, feel free to talk to each other in just a moment. But David, first of all, you've had a huge response to this Changing London. Just describe what you did, the beginnings of the project, when you basically reached out to Londoners and said, what do you want to say, what do you want to see?
Yes, that's right. Look, a couple of years ago, I was a bit exasperated by thinking about who their next candidate for mayor should be when it seemed to me we'd only just had the last mayoral election. And I thought it was much more interesting to think about what do we want the mayor to do and what might the big ideas be that underpin the next mayoralty. So we set up a very, very simple blog. It's an entirely voluntary project, just invited people to submit some ideas. We then had some meetings last summer to discuss those ideas. The book is the work of all those people who submitted the ideas. Effectively, it's a compilation of that thinking. And we call it a rough guide because it's not a manifesto. It doesn't deal with everything by any means, but it's a bunch of, we think, interesting ideas and some big visions, which is what we think the next mayor needs.
Did you edit them?
Only very lightly, interestingly. We had an ethical code, of course, and we said it has to be about ideas, not whinges. So when people submitted whinges, we sent it back and said, let us have an idea. What's the solution to this thing, rather than what's the problem?
Oh, so you didn't just dismiss the whinges. You went back and said, fine-tune your whinge and make it an idea, did you?
Absolutely, yes, and fascinatingly, pretty much everybody did.
And you've boiled it down to a few themes, haven't you, of areas that people want improvements?
Yes, we think it's really important that the mayor has got a vision for London that touches us all. And the one most often talked about by wannabe mayors is to be the world's most competitive city. Well, that just doesn't connect with most people that live here. What does that mean? We think an idea like the best place up is a vision that many of us can get behind and can understand and could be enthusiastic about. And we think the mayor doesn't just have those formal powers that go with the office, but they also have some what we call the superpowers, that convening power that goes with City Hall, and tremendous visibility in the city. So the opportunity to bring together some of the wonderful institutions and community groups and employers and others that we've got here, using those powers to deliver is something that we think the next mayor should put at the top of their priority.
So, Ivan Massow, the first challenge from David Robinson and the people who've contacted him through Changing London was it's not the who, it's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I love this idea about it being the best place to grow up. That's really because there's so many things you've got to address. So many people have talked to me, they're just talking about housing or affordability, and people seem to be quite depressed about London. But the reality is it's an amazing city to live anyway, and we're a torchbearer for human rights. We're amazing culturally. We have so much going on. It's not just financial. There's a reason why 500,000 French people choose to live here and only 16,000 of us choose to live in Paris. This is one of the best cities in the world.
When you say people are depressed about London, do you just mean the sort of commentators who talk about London, or do you mean that the people you've been speaking to in the lead up to announcing that you want have been saying it's becoming a hard place to live?
I think it's actually more driven by the commentators and the politicians. But when I go to public meetings, I hear a lot about just not being able to afford to live. And there was a report yesterday done by Loughborough University that said a third of people can't afford to live in London. And that's quite astonishing. And they weren't actually talking about the very poor. They were talking about the squeezed middle. They were talking about people who actually aren't on benefits or don't have
had decent
housing,
jobs but couldn't find
they
flats.
Just can't. Yeah, and they can't afford to pay
their
rent.
How much, David, did housing come up with the ideas that came into your website?
over and over again, Sheila, and it is very marked. Ivan talks about people wanting to live here, and that is certainly true of wealthier people. It is much less true in the less wealthy parts of the capital. So it's a cliche to talk about two cities, and we've tried to avoid doing that in the book. But there certainly are very marked differences and marked inequalities. You know that the healthiest people in our city have got the same life expectancy as people in Japan, the healthiest country on earth. Some of our poorest have got the same life expectancy as the people of Guatemala, ranked 143rd. Huge discrepancies in whatever issue you look at.
We do have the poorest boroughs, or some of the poorest boroughs in the country, which is what makes the kind of whole Barnett formula so unfair. And unfair that London doesn't have adequate devolution. When you look at what Manchester's getting, it has devolved health service. Now, if we had...
Not yet.
Well,
starting, yeah.
If we had a devolved health service and devolved public health initiatives, we could combine so much more. You could keep people out of hospital if you could maybe improve their home life. You know, there are so many different ways you can approach this.
David Robinson, with that health and that public health point that Ivan Massow's just made in mind, throw him a question in an attempt to represent some of the issues that were raised in Changing London. Try and be the voice for some of those questions that were raised.
Well, one of the big themes, Sheila, was that we should be a city that illness. A healthy city is about tackling sickness at source. So it's not just about the health service. It's also about things like clean air. It's about being able to cycle safely and walk safely. It's about people being safe on the streets, particularly women and young people. So it's thinking much more expansively, I think, about health rather than just how do we cure ills. And Ivan's right about the opportunities presented by devolution, but that, again, is where we need ideas. We can't just go to government and say, because we are London, we are entitled to devolved powers, which feels a bit to me what certainly commentators in London are doing at the moment. We have to go with, this is why we deserve these powers, because this is what we're going to do with them.
100%. And on the whole cycling thing and the whole public health issue around just getting people out, I almost feel we should reprioritise the way people travel and give priority to people who walk or who cycle over, let's say, cars. At the moment, they all have the same priority, but I think that a lot has to be done to make our streets safer.
I think the car is king, isn't it? Still,
because it can
roads,
hurt you.
Yeah.
And I think there should be a sort of increased penalties if you hit people in this country.
You talked about the livability of the city. You talked about the housing. The fact that a lot of people feel that housing is beyond their reach. I know that you pay the minimum wage to your campaign assistant, a fairly junior role. Should you be paying the living wage? This is an expensive city.
Me personally?
Yeah, your department.
I personally pay the minimum wage.
I've got an ad for the job of campaign.
Oh, sorry.
Saying that it's a national minimum wage, £6.50 an hour. I just think, you could lead from the front on this, couldn't you? And just say, well, actually, to live, you need a living wage, not just the minimum wage.
Oh yeah, we don't actually have anyone on that, but we've oh god.
Well, no, just I'm not trying to be unpleasant, but it's a fact, isn't it? An awful lot of people live in London and are on the minimum wage, and they need to be on a living wage.
Yeah. I'd be pushing for London living wage, and I think there are ways in which you can encourage businesses to do that. I think it's different when you're working from home running a campaign and what worries me most about dictating a London living wage is that, let's say in the situation of a campaign similar to the one we're running, when I came to London is still like a university. It's work opportunities. I didn't have the opportunity to go to university. I had to have people who would sort of give me chances, and I accepted that I would get less for that, or potentially even work for free. Now, you're no longer allowed to take people for free, so you pay them the...
Do you think people should work for free at the beginning of their career?
I think there are situations where all of us will do things like that. In order to make myself more attractive to certain publications, when I was trying to become a writer, I would write free for publications. I would do all sorts of things. I would work late. I would offer to do all sorts of work. And as a result, I grew my career. As an entrepreneur and as an individual, we sometimes have to think outside the box about how we make the world happen for us. And I don't want to close those opportunities to
I
people.
I understand what you're saying, but equally, as somebody who's now firmly inside the box and very successful, and you now have the opportunity to give people a start or to give people a chance, isn't it only right that if you're about to stand for public office in which you're going to be asking for people to pay the living wage, that this talk of working for free or working for much less, it just has to go?
No. I actually do disagree. I think that we have to. It's a choice for me, for instance. It's a choice between having no kind of assistance, or offering someone some kind of role. And I found that I was flooded with applications.
You're talking about your mayoral campaign here.
Yeah, because people want to get involved. But if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to do that.
Because you don't have the money to pay them all.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't no funding for the mayoral campaign whatsoever. So it's all coming out of my own pocket. So I know what I can afford to do and how I can afford to do it. And so, of course, I step up to the. But if I could afford more, I'd have a much larger team.
And what's your overarching ambition for the campaign then, for yourself, and the message you want to bring to Londoners? Do you have like a central ambition for what you want to achieve, particularly given what we heard from David there about the ideas that people are bringing?
Well, I kind of want to give people the opportunities that I had. I want London to remain entrepreneurial, and I want to find a way of allowing more people to get into work, but also to start their own businesses. I like things like the London Incubator Project, where you can start creating large tech hubs and mentoring projects to get more people sort of working and grow London.
And make sure they pay the living wage when they do work. Thank you very much, Ivan Massow. Ivan Massow, who's a London mayoral candidate. And many thanks as well to David Robinson, founder of the charity Community Links and co-author of Changing London. I recommend you have a look at that book. I read a proof copy of it, or elements of it this morning. Some brilliant ideas in it for London living. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you want to carry on giving your views on who is responsible when a 14-year-old goes so seriously off the rails that she's essentially jailed for assault. 0345 6060 973. It's 3:47.
I'm Chris Humphries in the LBC.